Sometimes silence speaks louder than any argument. When you've given your time, your energy, your love, and he chooses to overlook it, the most powerful move isn't to chase, but to walk. Let your absence echo louder than your presence ever did. When someone starts to overlook or take for granted what you offer, stepping back can be one of the most effective ways to shift the dynamic. People often don't realize the value of something until it's no longer in their immediate reach. This is especially true in relationships. The time, energy, and attention you give to someone are often perceived as a given when they're constantly available. But the moment you remove yourself, everything changes. Suddenly, there's a void, an absence, and that emptiness can trigger the realization of what was lost. This is where the real power lies. Value is not always understood when something is in abundance. People tend to take things for granted when they feel secure that they will always be around. It's only when something is taken away that it becomes painfully clear how much it was worth. By distancing yourself from someone who has taken you for granted, you force them to reckon with the true cost of their actions. In a sense, your absence magnifies the value you were already offering. In a relationship, especially one where emotional investment is involved, you're giving pieces of yourself every day. Whether it's your time, your patience, your affection, or your support, these are not intangible things, they are valuable resources. If someone isn't acknowledging or appreciating what you bring to the table, they may start assuming that it's always going to be available, that you'll always be there, ready to give. But in reality, there's a finite amount of energy and effort you can expend. Once you begin to step back, you force the other person to confront the reality of your worth. It's not about making them feel guilty. It's about allowing them to see clearly just how much you brought to their life and how easily that can disappear. One of the most profound ways to demonstrate your value is by showing that it's not unlimited. By no means does stepping back mean you're playing games or trying to manipulate. It's a simple act of self-preservation and recognition of your own worth. You're not begging for attention or validation. You're simply giving space for someone to recognize the importance of what they've had and maybe lost. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that your worth is directly tied to how much you're willing to give. But in reality, your value is innate. It doesn't decrease based on how much someone else acknowledges it. When you step back, it creates room for reflection. The person you're involved with may begin to realize that they've taken you for granted, and they might start to ask themselves where things went wrong. This moment of self-reflection is crucial because it is often the turning point where they start to understand the true depth of what you offered. But more importantly, it's the moment when you're no longer playing an active role in making them see that value. Instead, it's the absence of you that does the talking. When you're no longer present to fill the gaps, when you're no longer the person constantly showing up for them, it becomes clear how much you were carrying the relationship on your shoulders. By stepping back, you're not playing a passive role. Instead, you're creating an opportunity for the other person to step up. You're giving them the chance to prove that they can value you in the way you deserve. If they recognize the absence and take steps to rectify the situation, it shows that they were never truly blind to your worth. They just needed to feel the absence of it to appreciate it. But if they don't act, then it's a clear sign that their appreciation for you was never as deep as it needed to be. This is not just a moment of realization for them, but for you as well. It's a way to protect yourself from further emotional investment in someone who may not be ready to recognize the value you bring. In relationships, the act of stepping back can be one of the most powerful ways to communicate that your time and effort are not to be taken for granted. It's not about playing hard to get, but about demonstrating your own self-worth in the clearest way possible. By doing so, you're allowing the other person to experience the impact of losing you and in turn, allowing them to understand the true price of ignoring you. Silence is one of the most powerful tools at your disposal, especially in relationships where words often become diluted or overused. When emotions are high or when someone is not appreciating your presence, it's easy to fall into the trap of explaining, defending, or pleading for attention. But sometimes the most profound statement you can make is one of quietude. Choosing to remain silent, to step back and allow space to take over, can send a message far stronger than anything you could say in the heat of the moment. It's not about ignoring or avoiding, but rather about communicating your value through the absence of words. When you give someone the gift of silence, you're giving them the opportunity to truly reflect on their actions. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and noise, moments of quiet force people to slow down and think. Words can be misunderstood, misinterpreted, or even manipulated, but silence requires reflection. It's a void that naturally calls attention to itself. The absence of communication speaks volumes. While your words might be clouded by emotions or frustration, silence has no such baggage. It's pure and unfiltered, and it forces the other person to confront their own behavior, rather than getting caught up in defending theirs or trying to explain things away. Sometimes, the reason people fail to appreciate what they have is because they've never been without it. When you're always there, always available, always understanding, it's easy for your value to fade into the background. People may begin to take your presence for granted, assuming that you'll always be there to fill the space and offer your attention. But when you choose silence, you give them the chance to feel the void that your presence once filled. It's a jarring experience for many, especially if they've grown accustomed to your constant availability. That absence forces them to question what's missing, and more often than not, they will recognize that it's you. There is a strength in silence that can't be overstated. It's not weakness or passivity. It's an active choice, a conscious decision to stop trying to convince someone of your worth through words, and instead let them experience the impact of your absence. When you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop justifying your actions, you create space for the other person to realize the imbalance. Your silence doesn't mean that you're giving up on the relationship. It means that you're no longer willing to diminish your own value by constantly seeking validation. You're showing that you respect yourself enough to let your presence be felt without begging for it. Often, in the midst of conflict or frustration, we get caught in the cycle of words. We argue, we try to be heard, we make our points, and we repeat ourselves over and over. But rarely do we pause and ask ourselves if what we're saying is truly having the effect we want. More often than not, we end up arguing in circles with no resolution or understanding. Silence, however, creates an opportunity for things to settle. The emotions settle, the urgency settles, and when the dust clears, what's left is the space for clarity and understanding. The silence speaks louder than the most well-thought-out argument. There's also a certain level of power that comes from withholding your words. When you're not constantly speaking your mind or trying to express your hurt, you're forcing the other person to fill the void. And in doing so, they begin to understand the gravity of the situation. Silence allows them to see the relationship through a different lens. It's not about punishing them or playing mind games. It's about showing them that you're no longer going to settle for being overlooked. It's a quiet declaration that your time and energy are precious and deserve to be treated as such. In relationships where communication becomes strained or one-sided, silence isn't just an absence of words, it's a call for change. It's the moment when you stop investing in an unbalanced dynamic and start showing that you will no longer tolerate being ignored or undervalued. The silence you choose to create isn't just a space of emptiness, but a space that demands attention. It forces the other person to reconsider their actions, reflect on their behavior, and, most importantly, come to terms with the reality that you are not someone to be taken for granted. When someone begins to take you for granted or fails to recognize your worth, it's easy to feel compelled to confront them, to explain how you feel, or to remind them of all that you've given. However, the most powerful way to deal with this is by letting consequences speak for themselves, rather than using words to explain the impact of their actions. Sometimes, the most effective way to show someone the price of their indifference is by stepping away and allowing them to feel the weight of their choices. In relationships, actions always speak louder than words, and allowing the natural consequences of their neglect to unfold can be a much stronger statement than anything you could say in a conversation. When you continually invest your time, energy, and emotions into someone who isn't reciprocating, you're teaching them that their behavior doesn't have consequences. They may start to assume that no matter what they do, you'll always be there to clean up after them or to pick up the pieces of their mistakes. This is where letting the natural consequences of their actions take center stage becomes vital. People can easily become numb to the things they don't have to work for, and if you're always there, they may never fully appreciate what you bring to the table. It's when you step back that they're forced to confront the reality of the situation. The consequence of your absence can often hit harder than any confrontation could. By stepping away, you give them the space to truly understand what their actions have cost them. You're no longer offering your energy to fill the gaps, no longer compensating for their emotional neglect. This absence makes the stakes real for them. Instead of telling them how hurt you are or explaining why their behavior is damaging, you simply allow them to experience the gap that your presence once filled. The silence and the space between you becomes a powerful consequence of their actions. It's not about punishing them, but rather about showing them that you are a valuable presence, one that deserves to be respected and appreciated. When you're no longer available to be the emotional crutch or to constantly adjust your needs and desires to accommodate theirs, the dynamic shifts. People don't tend to fully understand the impact of their behavior until it affects them directly. And this is precisely where the natural consequences come into play. By stepping back, you're not manipulating the situation or trying to control their actions. You're simply allowing them to see what their choices have cost them. It's in this moment that they can choose to change, to recognize the value you brought, to respect your boundaries, and to put in the effort necessary to restore the connection. But the key here is that you're not forcing them to make this decision. You're simply giving them the room to realize it for themselves. This approach is powerful because it comes from a place of strength and self-respect. Instead of begging for attention, trying to force a conversation, or explaining why things aren't working, you let the absence of you speak for itself. It's an invitation for them to reflect on their actions without you pushing them into it. This allows for genuine growth or understanding to emerge from within them, rather than being externally imposed upon them. Sometimes, the most profound changes in relationships come not from dramatic confrontations or emotional outbursts, but from the quiet realization that something important has been lost. People often think that by being quiet or passive, they're letting the other person off the hook. But in reality, the lack of communication can create an environment where growth and realization can happen naturally. Without being told what's wrong or why something is missing, they are left to fill in the blanks themselves. The absence of your presence speaks volumes. And in many cases, this can be the wake-up call that prompts someone to evaluate how they've been behaving and whether they want to risk losing something valuable. Rather than expending emotional energy trying to change someone or convince them of your worth, you let the situation unfold organically. This approach is often far more effective because it encourages the other person to come to their own conclusions. It's not about forcing them to feel bad or guilty. It's simply allowing them the space to see the real consequences of their actions. When they realize what they've lost, the next steps are entirely in their hands, whether they decide to make amends, show more appreciation, or walk away. And in either case, the consequences of their actions will have given you the clarity you need to understand where you stand and how much your presence is truly valued. In any relationship, whether romantic, familial, or friendship-based, it's easy to get caught up in seeking validation from the other person. We often find ourselves trying to prove our worth or our love through constant gestures, attention, and emotional investment. However, one of the most important realizations you can come to is that your self-respect should never be contingent on the other person's recognition or approval. True self-respect isn't about waiting for validation from someone else. It's about recognizing your own value and demanding that others do the same. The moment you realize that your worth is not defined by someone else's acknowledgement, you free yourself from the exhausting cycle of seeking approval. When you stop seeking validation and instead focus on your own self-worth, you take control of the dynamic. It's not about becoming distant or cold. It's about recognizing that your time, energy, and emotions are valuable, and you deserve to be treated with the respect that reflects that. You should never have to convince someone that you're worth their time and attention. If they don't see it naturally, then you don't have to go out of your way to force them to understand it. You are not here to prove your worth, but to be respected for who you are and what you bring to any relationship. Self-respect is a clear line in the sand. It's setting boundaries that protect your emotional and mental well-being, ensuring that you aren't continuously lowering your standards to accommodate someone who doesn't value you. When you chase validation, you start to dilute your own worth. You may find yourself constantly seeking the other person's approval, adjusting who you are to fit their needs, and losing sight of the fact that you are already whole, complete, and deserving of the best. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that if you just show more affection or give more of yourself, they will appreciate you. But true appreciation comes from someone who values you inherently, not because of what you do for them, but because of who you are. When you choose to stop chasing validation, you automatically raise the bar for how you allow others to treat you. You begin to communicate that your love, your time, and your energy are not something to be taken for granted. The moment you stop seeking validation is when you start respecting yourself fully. You stop begging for affection, attention, or recognition, and instead focus on giving those things to yourself. You begin to see your own value and acknowledge that you deserve to be treated with the same level of respect you give to others. This shift is not about arrogance or pride. It's about self-preservation and understanding that your worth doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's perception of you. Self-respect also means understanding that you have the right to walk away from situations that no longer serve you or are not aligned with your values. If someone continues to ignore or undervalue you, self-respect requires that you stop fighting for their attention. You don't have to beg them to see your worth or try to convince them that you're worthy of their time. Instead, you simply walk away, knowing that your value is not dependent on their recognition of it. This act is not a form of punishment or an attempt to make them feel guilty, but rather a declaration that you respect yourself enough to know when it's time to move on. It's an understanding that you deserve to be in a relationship where your worth is acknowledged without question. When self-respect becomes your foundation, it allows you to navigate relationships with more clarity and confidence. You stop compromising your values, your time, and your energy in order to meet someone else's needs or desires. You begin to realize that you don't need to sacrifice your well-being for the sake of someone else's approval. Instead, you become more selective about where you invest your emotional energy and who you allow to enter your life. You start to demand the same respect and appreciation that you give to others, not out of entitlement, but because you understand that you deserve it. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of learning to trust your own worth and refusing to settle for anything less than the respect and love you deserve. It takes time to stop seeking validation and instead cultivate self-respect. But once you've made this internal shift, you'll find that your relationships change too. Those who truly value you will step up, while those who don't will fade away. And in either case, you will be left with a sense of inner peace, knowing that you've made the most important choice of all to prioritize your own self-respect above everything else. Absence has a unique way of revealing what's truly important to someone. In a relationship, whether it's with a partner, friend, or family member, people often don't realize the depth of their attachment or their true feelings until something is taken away. It's easy to become complacent in a relationship, assuming that the other person will always be there, that their presence or support is a given. But when you create space, when you step back, it forces them to confront the reality of their feelings and priorities. Suddenly, they have to acknowledge whether you were as integral to their life as you once were, or if your presence was merely filling a gap they didn't realize existed. The absence of someone can create a void that cannot be ignored. It's in this emptiness that people are often able to reflect and reevaluate what truly matters. In the rush of daily life, people sometimes forget to appreciate those who stand by them, the ones who offer their time, love, and care without hesitation. But when that presence is no longer available, the impact becomes undeniable. The person left behind is forced to ask themselves difficult questions. Was this person as important to me as I thought? How has their absence affected my life? Without even saying a word, you've communicated the importance of your presence simply by not being there anymore. What's fascinating about absence is that it doesn't just make the heart grow fonder, it also forces clarity. When someone is no longer in the picture, their absence becomes a reflection of what was once present. For the person who didn't fully appreciate you, the gap becomes a stark reminder of the value you brought to their life. You can't truly understand how much you meant to someone until you're no longer there to fulfill that role. It's not about playing games or trying to make the other person feel guilty. It's simply about allowing them the opportunity to recognize how much of their life you contributed to, whether emotionally, physically, or mentally. In relationships where one person has been undervalued or ignored, stepping away doesn't need to be dramatic or drawn out. It's not about disappearing or completely severing ties. It's about creating space that allows the other person to see how much they depended on you without realizing it. In that silence, they'll be able to evaluate their priorities and determine whether they were taking you for granted. The absence isn't a punishment, it's a way to restore equilibrium. It gives them the chance to acknowledge where they went wrong, to come to terms with their behavior, and to either appreciate what they had or face the reality of its loss. This absence can often trigger a period of self-reflection for both parties. The one who stepped away might begin to reevaluate their worth, wondering whether they've been too available or too generous with their time and emotions. The person who's been left behind will begin to consider how their actions or lack thereof have affected the relationship. In the quiet, without the distraction of constant interaction, both parties are left to assess the relationship for what it truly was and what it can become. The absence forces them to see if they miss the person, the dynamic, or the comfort of familiarity. It also challenges them to acknowledge whether they were truly invested or simply coasting along without much thought. The beauty of absence is that it provides a moment of clarity that often leads to a more profound understanding of what the relationship means. For the person who has been undervalued or ignored, it becomes an opportunity to see whether their worth is recognized when they are no longer readily available. For the person left behind, it's a chance to evaluate their priorities, their behavior, and their feelings. In both cases, absence opens the door to awareness and understanding. When you step back, you're not only allowing the other person to feel the void, but also giving yourself the opportunity to see where you stand. Are you being appreciated in the way you deserve? Are you being taken for granted because you've been too available or too accommodating? Absence reveals answers to these questions that are often obscured in the busyness of everyday life. And once those answers emerge, it becomes much easier to make decisions moving forward, whether that's choosing to re-enter the relationship with new boundaries or walking away, knowing that you deserve someone who recognizes and values your presence. The notion that you are the reward, not the chase, challenges the conventional ideas that many people hold about relationships. So often, society promotes the idea that in order to secure someone's affection, you have to make yourself available, chase after them, and constantly prove your worth. The problem with this approach is that it positions you as someone who has to earn love and attention, when in reality, love and respect should be freely given based on mutual appreciation, not constant effort to prove oneself. When you recognize that you are the reward, you begin to understand that you don't have to chase after someone's approval or affection instead. It should be a privilege for them to earn your time, energy, and commitment. At the heart of this mindset is a shift in perspective. When you believe you are the reward, you stop undervaluing your own needs and start recognizing your own worth. You don't chase people who are indifferent, and you don't give more of yourself than you're receiving. Instead, you begin to prioritize your own self-respect and your own happiness over the approval of someone who may not fully appreciate you. This is not about arrogance or being unapproachable. It's about acknowledging that your value isn't something that needs to be constantly proven or earned. You are already worthy of love, respect, and care, and the right person will recognize that without you having to bend over backward to show them. The truth is, many people fall into the trap of chasing after love because they are afraid of being rejected, or they fear they'll never find someone who appreciates them. This fear of abandonment can cause people to overcompensate, doing things they wouldn't typically do or lowering their standards to please someone else. However, when you flip the script and begin to see yourself as the prize, you stop devaluing your worth in the hopes of receiving validation. You set a standard for how you expect to be treated, and you wait for someone who is willing to meet that standard. Instead of constantly trying to win over someone who is indifferent or distant, you create the space for someone who truly values you to step up and show their commitment. Being the reward doesn't mean playing hard to get or withholding affection as a game. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are not to be given away to just anyone. It's about knowing that the right person will want to earn your trust, your love, and your companionship through their actions, not just their words. You don't have to beg for their attention or try to be everything they need to make them value you. Instead, you focus on your own life, your passions, and your happiness, and trust that the right person will naturally be drawn to the person you are. This mindset allows you to stand in your power and to refuse to settle for less than what you deserve. When you're seen as the reward, you're no longer stuck in a position where you're constantly worried about whether someone values you or whether they're just going through the motions. The dynamic changes when you take a step back and realize that the best relationships are built on mutual respect and shared effort, not just one person constantly chasing the other. When you embody this mindset, you stop giving more than you receive and stop chasing after someone who isn't putting in the effort. you begin to understand that if someone truly values you, they will make the effort to prove it, just as you would do for them. By embracing the idea that you are the reward, you remove the pressure of trying to be perfect or doing everything right to gain someone's love. You understand that love is not a transaction or something that has to be won. It's a mutual exchange of respect, care, and effort. When you believe that you are the reward, you stop chasing the wrong people and start attracting those who are willing to meet you at your level, who are ready to give as much as they receive. You don't settle for people who are indifferent or who take you for granted. Instead, you wait for those who see you for the incredible person you are, and who are willing to put in the effort to create a relationship that is based on equality and mutual respect. In the end, being the reward is about more than just attracting the right person. It's about having the self-respect to demand that your value be recognized and honored. It's about standing firm in your own worth, knowing that you are deserving of a love that is freely given, and that you don't have to chase after anyone who doesn't recognize your incredible worth. You are the reward, and the right person will always know that. In the end, the journey of recognizing your worth and understanding how to navigate relationships with self-respect is one of the most transformative things you can experience. Throughout this discussion, we've explored how silence, absence, self-respect, and the recognition that you are the reward can shape the way you approach your interactions with others. When you shift your mindset from chasing after validation to knowing your inherent worth, you open the door to more meaningful, fulfilling relationships that are grounded in mutual respect and appreciation. You begin to recognize that your love, time, and energy are valuable, and when you stop constantly proving your worth, you allow others to see the true power of your presence. The act of stepping back and creating space, whether through silence or absence, isn't about playing games or manipulating the situation. It's about showing that your time and energy are not to be taken for granted. It's a subtle yet powerful message that you deserve to be treated with the same respect and consideration that you offer to others. When someone begins to realize that their actions or lack thereof have consequences, they are given the opportunity to understand the true value of what they had or risk losing it completely. Through this process, you are not only teaching them but also reaffirming your own self-worth, which is crucial in any relationship. Equally, the idea that you are the reward transforms the way you view your relationships. Instead of chasing after someone's affection, attention, or validation, you understand that the right person will naturally be drawn to you, recognizing the unique value you offer. You stop lowering your standards and instead focus on maintaining your own integrity, self-respect, and happiness. The person who truly values you will rise to meet you, will work to show their appreciation and affection in ways that are meaningful. You don't have to exhaust yourself by constantly proving that you're worthy of love and care. You are already worthy, and the right person will recognize that effortlessly. In these dynamics, it's important to remember that self-respect isn't about being cold or detached. It's about understanding the boundaries you need in order to maintain your emotional well-being. It's about knowing that you deserve to be treated with kindness, consideration, and love. When you prioritize your own self-worth, you set a standard for how others should treat you, and you stop wasting time on relationships that don't honor that standard. By stepping away from situations where your value isn't appreciated, you not only teach others the price of their actions, but also create the space for healthier, more fulfilling connections in the future. Ultimately, the lesson is clear: stop chasing, stop pleading, and stop settling. The right person will recognize your worth when you stop trying to convince them. You don't need to be constantly available, constantly proving your love, or constantly explaining why you deserve to be treated well. Simply by understanding your own value and walking in that truth, you allow others to meet you at the same level. In the process, you empower yourself to choose relationships that honor who you are, and you allow others the opportunity to rise to the occasion, appreciating the incredible person you are without needing to prove it over and over again. By embodying these principles, you cultivate not just better relationships, but a stronger, more grounded sense of self, and in the end, that's where true fulfillment lies.